Join the Rising Tide Mastermind. Discover a community where passionate professionals come together to support each other's growth. Be part of a tribe that celebrates your wins and helps you overcome challenges. Don't navigate your journey alone. Find your community with us, the Rising Tide Mastermind. To find out more about the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O Podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. And happy New Year, Scaling Up Nation. It's hard to believe we are celebrating 2025. I feel like I was just saying that a week ago, but it was really a year ago. And that's what today is. Today is the first episode of the new year. So we are going to have so many new episodes. I think total we'll have 57 episodes for you at the end of the year. That's because we do some extra episodes during Industrial Water Week. And you can look forward to a brand new episode of the Scaling Up H2O podcast each and every Friday. People ask me, why do we release them on Friday? And I say, why not release them on Friday? A good friend of the Scaling Up Nation, of the podcast, Brian Kotarski of Aqua Phoenix, once told me that he likes to have a new podcast so he can do yard work. So we release them on Friday so they're nice and fresh and ready to go for him over the weekend. Hey, that's the reason we started on Friday. I had to have a reason. So there it is. I think I've said that before. I think I told him that when he was on the podcast. But Nation, I love bringing this podcast to you. And I want to thank all of you for listening and being part of the Scaling Up Nation. And if you didn't know, tens of thousands of people are in the Scaling Up Nation. And really what that means is we have a water treatment community that is centered around the work that we do. And we're being brought together each and every week by listening to this podcast. And while you're listening to this podcast, just know that there's somebody else, lots of other somebody else's that are listening to this podcast at the same time you are listening to this podcast, and they are in the same industry that you are in. They're having maybe a similar day to the one that you are having. Maybe they just found an issue that they don't know the exact answer for, just like you did. Maybe you just sold your biggest customer and you are ready to celebrate. Whatever it is, we are all in the industrial water treatment field, and we are all part of the Scaling Up Nation. And I know I have heard from many people how helpful that is when you feel lonely, when you feel like you haven't seen anybody the entire day. You drove all morning to that first account and they just didn't have time to see you at the account. You spent hours in the mechanical room, in the plant, and now you're driving back and you're thinking, oh my gosh, is there anybody else that has a day like this? Well, there are tens of thousands of people that are listening to this podcast that understand exactly what you are going through. Now, that might be a lonely day, but there's also some very exciting days, so we can celebrate with the Scaling Up Nation as well. Nation, the reason we have so many people in the Scaling Up Nation is because of you. So many people will share episodes and let people know about this podcast. There is no way that I would have been able to grow the Scaling Up Nation as much as it has grown since episode 1. That's when Scaling Up Nation had one listener. That was me. And because of all the things that you do to promote this podcast, to help keep it on the air with new ideas, we have so many people within the Scaling Up Nation. And I just want to thank you for making that possible. Nation, in today's episode, we are going to talk about what you have store for this podcast, for yourself. I'm going to share some things from me for the year of 2025. But we do have a holiday in the United States coming up. Well, a quasi holiday. So on January 10th, National Cut Energy Cost Day, which is put on by the Department of Energy, is taking place. And you might be thinking, I've never heard of that. What the heck is that? Well, nation, each and every day we have our minds on how do we conserve water, the most valuable resource that we have on this planet. And of course, we do that each and every day. And that is what being a water treater is. How do we maximize water's potential? How do we make sure that we use it to its full potential? How do we make sure that people don't have to buy any more than they need to? And of course, how do we make sure we're not wasting that? So all of that rolled up is what our job is. As I've mentioned on this podcast before, I've been involved in a lot of LEED building plannings. That is where we're trying to get a building certified to be efficient on the entire environment. And there's just a little teensy part, it's a lot bigger now than it was, that deals with water. And an even smaller part of that deals with the type of water that you and I deal with. And we all know that we can save tremendous amounts of water just by doing our job the way that you and I. And during those meetings, we do get to talk about some water savings, but the bulk of that meeting is around other types of savings. And now it's involved with the health of that building. So if you've never been in a meeting like that, I'm going to say it's very interesting. It's also a privilege to be on that council, to take the expertise that we have about water and share it with them. But one of the other items that they talk about is how do we make it energy efficient? And I know energy efficiency is part of what we do, but that's what this holiday is focused on. I don't know if it's a real holiday. I don't know if that's the right term for it. It is a day, and it's a day of awareness where we're going to look to see how we can save some money this year. So it's perfectly fine to be selfish and we can focus on our home, but I promise this will translate into your business and into your customers' businesses as well. So how do you celebrate National Cut Your Energy Costs Day? Well, there are some simple things that you can do that will pay you through the entire year. And the number one thing that you can do is upgrade the lighting in your home. Now, if you still have incandescent bulbs, well, that's surprising because I don't even think you can buy those anymore. So you're hanging on to them. I get that. Maybe they're antiques, but it is impressive how much energy an incandescent bulb actually uses. Now, we were doing an experiment with one of our battery cells here at the Scaling Up H2O studio. We've got some battery backups, and I wanted to see how long it would last. So I actually took an incandescent bulb that we had. I hooked it up to that battery backup, and we actually did a test to see how that battery discharged. And because we knew the output of the bulb, we were able to figure out how long that was going to last. I know I'm kind of a geek that way, but it was impressive how much energy that 60-watt incandescent bulb uses. Now, there are these things out there called LED lights, and I'm pretty sure most of you have these throughout your home. But if you do not, the savings from going to incandescent to LEDs, especially if you start today and you take that savings out through the entire year, it is impressive. It is hundreds of dollars. In fact, I think you will pay for all of the bulbs that you buy to replace your incandescents with LEDs probably within the first month or so. So if you do still have incandescent lights around, heck, even if you have some fluorescent lights around, you might want to consider changing them out with LEDs. It definitely is an energy savings because they don't use a lot of power, but they also don't get as hot. And that means we don't have to cool the area. So that's some secondary savings that we get. Now, when I first bought the facility that we are in right now, we had those gymnasium type lighting in our warehouse. And whenever we turned them on, you could actually see the rest of the lights dim a little bit, and it would take a while for them to warm up. And if you went outside to see the meter, it was spinning so fast that it was really, really racking up some electrical costs. And when we turned those off, it just turned around very, very slowly. So it didn't take us long to figure out we need to replace these. Well, what did we replace them with? We replaced them with fluorescents out in the warehouse, and that helped tremendously. Well, then we decided years later to replace them with LEDs, and the cost savings on lighting the warehouse was tremendous. I also think they give off a better light. And of course, in the warehouse, we're blending products, we're doing all sorts of things. We want to make sure that we have good light. And let me tell you that LED light, I think we got 6,000 Kelvin lighting that's outside. It's kind of like sunlight. It is very nice out there, and we can see everything that we need to, and we're not spending a lot of money. So imagine doing that to your house, wherever you are. So consider upgrading your lighting. Another thing that you may or may not be aware of is you are not using the air conditioning when you're not in your home. And your pets really don't care up to a certain degree. So don't cook them out of your house in the summer, but you can definitely sway the temperature somewhere between 5 and 10 degrees, and you are going to see a tremendous amount of savings. Now, that used to just be a programmable thermostat, but the technology is so much better now. One of the thermostats that we have in our house is called the Ecobee. And I know there's lots of different brands out there, but it actually learns when you enter the house, when you leave the house. It's got different motion sensors. It also has different mini thermostats for various parts of the house. So maybe the thermostat is in the living room and you all are in the dining room. Well, it will know you're in the dining room. And if you wanted a particular degree there, it's going to measure the dining room, not the thermostat where nobody is residing in or nobody is eating dinner in. That's pretty cool in its own, but it also knows when you leave in the morning and typically when you come back, and it will get the home ready before you walk in the door. So as far as you are concerned, you did not change the thermostat at all, but you got the savings of having it go 5 to 10 degrees warmer or colder while nobody was in the home. It's pretty cool. And you can also grant access to the electric company if you choose to do so. And the one here, Georgia Power, they actually sent me a $120 gift card for doing so. And on days where there are very high energy uses being predicted, they can actually dial back your HVAC. And you can override it too. If you decide, no, I'm home today, I don't want to do that. But they actually gave me $120 for signing that up. That paid for the thermostat. So there are these things out there that you can do that will save you money. Now, something we did several years ago is we put solar on our office. And we have about 60 kilowatt hours of power generation on our roof. And since we put that in, we have more than paid for that project. We also decided to put batteries in, and those batteries have saved us multiple times. We have lost power. Well, actually, the area that we were in has lost power. And we did not skip a beat. We can go about 3 days if we're conservative on our batteries. Now, lucky for us, just a couple of hours is what we needed each and every time we lost power. Well, whenever the storms come by, we don't worry because we have batteries. And I want to say last year we took advantage of that 5 different times where we were without power in the area for maybe 5 minutes, maybe a couple of hours. But our team didn't notice that. Our internet didn't go down. Our phones didn't go down. Everything, our lights were working, our computers were working. And that was all because of batteries. And because we get to sell that energy back to the electric company, we've actually paid for our batteries and our solar through selling the energy back, and then also the amount of energy that we are not using because we're getting it from the sun. Now, here's the cool thing about the solar and battery combination. We actually make more solar in most cases, more solar power, that is, during the day than we can use. Well, the batteries store it up so we can use it when the sun goes down. That was a game changer when it came to what we were looking for as far as reducing our energy consumption. So maybe you consider doing this on your home, maybe your business. And I will tell you, there are tax credits to do this. So as we're looking for ways to cut energy costs, that might be one that you want to look into. Now, when was the last time you looked at your air conditioner? Now, we had, during one of the storms that I just mentioned, a lightning strike that took our unit out here at the office, and we had to replace it. Now, the great thing, our great insurance agent helped us get a claim. So they helped us with the price of a new air conditioning unit. But we noticed that during the summer, our usage was even lower because that unit was about 10 years old that died. And the newer units are so much more efficient. So you might be waiting for your unit at home or the office to die, but you might be stumbling over some savings by keeping that in use. So I'm not saying that the math is definitely going to work out that way, but you might want to consider the different savings because it was tremendous. Now, you might be asking, how do I know this? Well, when we installed solar, when we installed the batteries, it actually came with some software and a user interface to tell us where all of our power was coming from and where it was going. And because of that, we are now very conscious of how much power we're using in the office. We've got an iPad up in the conference room, and we can tell when certain items are being used and when certain items are not. And it became kind of a game. How do we eliminate any waste and see how low we can go? And just by watching it, it got better. And now we're pretty consistent with that low power. And we didn't think that we could get it any lower until we replaced that air conditioning unit. So that's how we know. And we have the proof that we are glad that we got a new one. The last thing that I will mention is that you can get an energy audit for your home from your power company. And a lot of power companies will actually do this for free or offer discounts or rebates. So go ahead and go to wherever you're getting your power from and see if this is something you can take advantage of. We had this done at both our home and our office. It's really interesting what they do. They hook some fans up to your doorways. They make your home negative pressure and positive pressure, and they show you where all the leaks are. They'll actually take a thermal gun and show you places that aren't insulated properly. And by doing that, we were able to seal some items we didn't even know were leaking, and it made a big difference in how hot or cold we were trying to keep either our house or our office. So that's something that didn't cost us a dime. Now, it did at first. They gave us a rebate back, but we did get the rebate, and we're now getting the savings of it. And I get to share the experience of it with the entire Scaling Up Nation. So on January 10th for National Cut Energy Cost Day, maybe consider what are some things that I can do that keep some green in my pocket and not going out the window, wasting on unneeded energy costs. Now, Nation, if you want to bone up on some things you can do for energy savings in the Scaling Up H2O library, well, most recently, our friend James Courtney was talking about sustainability on episode 394. And then a little further back on episode 360, our friend Andy Rymink was talking about things that he was doing in his business, not only to save some money, but also make sure that they were a desirable company when they were talking to prospective customers. So that's a great episode to listen to, as well as the one with James. So feel free to check that out. Now, another James that's always keeping us in the know, and every year James has a new segment, and you're probably wondering, what is James doing this year? Well, let's find out together.
Hello and welcome to What Do You Know? The game show where we find out what do you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Do You Know? Today's question is, what is the approximate pH where phenylphthalein changes between pink and clear? A pH of 8.3. That answer could be handy at times when checking the reading from your pH meter. I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Do You Know?
Nation, I so badly wanted to say, what do you know? James is back with a new segment, but I wanted to make James do the reveal. I didn't want to steal that from him. James is helping us once again help the water treatment community get a little bit smarter, a little bit more skill each and every week. So, James, thank you for all that you do with that. And Nation, I want you to know some things that you can expect this year with the Scaling Up H2O podcast. Well, of course, you're going to have weekly episodes. We already talked about that. And it's on Friday, but you can consume them wherever. And I have heard many people will download the episodes and listen to them where they don't have internet service. And maybe that's on an airplane. There's lots of pilots that listen to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, and they will listen to the Scaling Up H2O podcast while they're flying. So please make sure you're safe while you're doing that. But I love that you are listening to the show. And then something we started a while ago, we're going to continue this year, are the newsletters that we send out. So real easy to get the newsletters. Probably the easiest way to do that is to go to our LinkedIn page, and you can look for scalinguph2o.com. You can look for Trace Blackmore. Go ahead and become a contact with us over LinkedIn. And you will see we will have weekly newsletters. Another way is you can get on our mailing list where we will send you what show is coming out. And that's super easy. You can go to scalinguph2o.com and sign up for our mailing list there. We will promise that we will not spam you. We will not bombard you. We just want to make sure that you get the information you need so you can learn efficiently and effectively this year. And of course, while you're at the Scaling Up H2O website, go ahead and just rummage around the website. There is so much information on that website. We have over 400 episodes of content, but not to mention just the episodes, all of the resources that the team here has collected, as well as all of the resources that our guests have shared with us. Those are all there for your reference on the scalinguph2o.com website. Our search feature is pretty easy to use, but we also have a resources tab. And anytime we have a large subject like Legionella or something like that, we make a resources page for it just to make it easy for you to find. And I have to say, when it comes to waterborne pathogens and Legionella, if you go to our Legionella resources page, there is so much content there because we've had so many amazing guests on over the years, and all of that information is curated right there on that Legionella resources page. I highly encourage you to check that out because that is your one-stop shop where you can find the latest, greatest information. You can even find archival information. And that way you can have a great conversation. You can even provide resources to that customer that wants you to teach them more about Legionella and waterborne pathogens. So all of that is there for you just for going to scalinguph2o.com. Also, we are going to hear from more sponsors this year. Now, I remember years ago, I was very hesitant to bring sponsors on the podcast because I didn't want people to think, oh, this is just another monetary type podcast. But I also quickly learned that you need to buy a lot in order to have a successful podcast. Now, whether that is working with staff members and growing the staff, maybe that is equipment, maybe that's software, maybe that's advertising, all of these things, they do cost something. And of course, all of the new things that we're doing, there comes a cost with that. So I was thinking, okay, well, how do we do this? And I asked the Scaling Up Nation, this was years ago, I don't remember the episode, that if you had a comment on whether we should do sponsorships or not, let me know. And overwhelmingly, people said, Trace, we love this podcast. We really want it to stay on the air, and we want to see how you can improve it. So it was overwhelmingly, yes, we should do this. But still, I was a little hesitant to do it. And then our friend, the Scaling Up Nation's friend, Mike Standish, caught me at an AWT conference. And he said, Trace, we want to help you with this. This is like the talk of the AWT convention this year. And it would be an honor for you to allow sponsors to help you with such a great resource, such a resource that people enjoy. And it was then that I realized, okay, that I am not looking at this correctly. I need to look at this holistically. And my guarantee is that whenever you hear a sponsor on this podcast, it's either a product that I have used or I can see myself using it because it's going to better the livelihood of the Scaling Up Nation. So that's the prerequisite. And because of that, we have so many amazing sponsors. So if you're a sponsor out there and you're listening, thank you for all the support. And so many sponsors have come to us saying they want to do something within 2025. So I just want to say thank you to all the sponsors and thank you, Scaling Up Nation, for allowing me not only to share that process I went with when we were trying to figure out if we were going to do sponsorships, but actually being part of that process. Now, as far as the guests that are going to come on this podcast, we try to schedule at least a quarter out to make sure that we always have content, that we're never going to be late for you. And knock on wood, we've been doing this for 8 years, and we have only put out a late episode once because a server was down. only happen once. So we're always trying to keep on top of that. So each and every week, you know that there's going to be a brand new episode. But the only way we can do that is with the help of our guest. And I want to thank all the guests that have been on the podcast, all the guests that are going to be on the podcast. And as you know, and here it comes, you hear this most every episode. If you are somebody that we need to interview, or you know somebody that we should interview on this podcast, we try to do a good job of finding guests, but it is so much easier when they find us. So if you know somebody, go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our ideas page, let us know who that is, and we will try to get them on this podcast. We are on episode 401 today. Well, we're going to do well more than an additional 400 episodes, which means we need to make sure that we have content for that. While you're there, if you have an idea for the show, well, the same spot, scalinguph2o.com, and going over to our ideas page, you can write down what that idea is. And we will put that on our planning list of events. And we try to plan about every quarter. Sometimes they're themes. Sometimes we try to highlight what's going on in the industry. So by having a lot of options to choose from, you are helping ensure that we have a podcast each and every week. Now, something I absolutely love hearing when I talk to many of you is how you're utilizing this podcast with your team to make sure your team is growing. And what a lot of teams are doing is they will assign a particular podcast, and then they will have a discussion around that particular podcast. And so many people are doing that. Well, after I heard that, I got together with the great team here at Scaling Up H2O, and we said, how can we help the members of the Scaling Up Nation do this and make it even easier for them? So what we've done is we've created some discussion guides from some previous episodes that we've had. So episode 339, where Jane Kuchera talked all about reverse osmosis, we created a discussion guide for that. Also, another highly popular issue was our friend Casey Brown, where she was telling us how we need to consider our pricing, making sure that we were pricing right. So that's episode 363. We have a discussion guide for that. We also did one for episode 397, and that was a pinks and blues, where I was talking to you about how I try to be as efficient as possible with my testing and how I look at testing. So maybe that's something you want to download and look for your team. That was episode 397. And then 375, that was the opening to last year's Legionella Awareness Month. So we went ahead and did a discussion guide for that as well. These discussion guides are 100% free. And what they allow you to do, say you're leading a discussion, you can download this guide, and it has 2 pages on it. The first page you can give to all your team members, and it basically has a synopsis of the episode, and then what are some questions that you want people to answer from the episode. Then on the second page, there are some brief answers. They're not the only answers, but just to kind of guide the facilitator along of those questions that you gave everybody. So I'd love to hear how you like this content. Do you have any suggestions for us? Are you using that? And we, as we develop this and get information from you, are going to start doing this on more and more shows this year. So if you go to scalinguph2o.com, go to right now, it's episode 339, episode 363, episode 397, and episode 375, you will see that there will be a discussion guide in the show notes page. And then as new episodes come together with discussion guides, If you go on the web page during that week, you'll see a pop-up where you can click and get that discussion guide. So I want to thank all the people that told me that they were having team discussions, and this is our way to help the Scaling Up Nation not only continue that, but maybe make it a little bit easier and make it a little bit better. So with the Scaling Up Nation, our job is to have a community of water treatment professionals. We say that we want to raise the bar in the industrial water treatment community, one water treater at a time. And that was just one of the ideas of many that you all have helped us with. Now, I mentioned episode 375 was the beginning of Legionella Awareness Month. Well, that's in August, and that is always very well listened to. So we're going to do that again this year, the entire month of August. So if you have a Legionella or waterborne pathogen expert, by all means, please introduce them to us so we can get them on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And then when I was telling you how many episodes we were going to have this year, and you said, wait a second, there's only 52 weeks in a year, but you are actually having 4 more episodes. Well, that is because of Industrial Water Week. And that's our huge celebration that we have with the Scaling Up Nation. That's always the first full week in October. So this year, that's going to be October 6th through 10th, where we celebrate the entire week, celebrating you and all the things that you do in industrial water. So go ahead and put that on your calendar, October 6th through 10th. Now, a lot of times on these shows, I will do a planning episode at the beginning of the year. And I'm going to do things a little bit differently this year. I'm going to tell you how I go through the mindset of planning. Now, if you go to last year's January 1st week episode, I will tell you something different. If you go the year before that and the year before that, it's all about planning. And I wanted to add to that content, not repeat that content. So I want you to know that what I try to do is figure out how successful or how not successful I was the previous year. Now, that, of course, is getting things done, but it's also my relationships. Did I actually improve the most important relationships in my life? Are my relationships getting better? What's life trying to teach me, not only about the things I'm trying to get done, but how my relationships are going? Now, one of my heroes throughout my lifetime was my grandfather, Dr. Ray Blackmore, Lieutenant Commander Dr. Ray Blackmore, an amazing individual. We lost him when he was 98 years old, and he told me that the only thing that matters are our relationships. And he was so right. And that's what I want you to consider. It's not just the things that you're doing, but are you consciously trying to improve your relationships? And life will teach you what you need to know. Ask yourself, was I trying to do too much during this particular time? Was I not trying to do enough during this particular time? Did you align what you were working on last year with how your life was going? Maybe something changed in your life and you had a plan to get something done, but you didn't account for this life change. However, you still held yourself accountable for the original plan, not accounting for the life change. So what was life trying to teach you with that? And again, it's not just about goals, the things that we want to get done, but it's also about your roles. Now, here's something I'm going to share with you that I learned from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. What are your most important roles that you have in your life? And think about it. Maybe you're a father, a mother, a sister, a brother. Name all the top 5 roles that you have, and then go ahead and fill in what that person's name is that you fill that role with. And they recommend that you don't do really more than 5 as you start out. So now you're looking at your 5 most important roles. And then you're going to write a tribute statement for each of them. And the way I really like the tribute statement to take a mental image is imagine it's your 90th birthday party. And everybody that you just listed in these 5 roles is going to be a keynote speaker celebrating what you have done for them throughout your lifetime. That's pretty cool, right? What is that tribute statement? And then that is the goal that you're going to work towards in that relationship. Now, in order to do this, you've got to break off little bite-sized pieces because you're not going to get that done in a day. You're going to get that done over a lifetime. So what's something you can do this week that helps that relationship get to the point where they would say whatever you said for your tribute statement? Now, whatever that bite-sized piece is, maybe it's you're going to give them a call. It could be something as simple as that. Maybe you're going to send them a card. Maybe you're going to take them to lunch. Maybe you're going to have some sort of special conversation with them. If it's a child, maybe you're going to go to one of their sporting events. You get the idea. But these little bite-sized pieces are very manageable and they add up to what we hope that tribute statement will become. The problem is a lot of times our relationships suffer because so many things are demanding our attention. And if we don't stop and see what's really and truly important to us, as my grandfather said, the only thing that matters are your relationships. So this forces us to look at those relationships. Now let's talk about all those things that happen to us. And my favorite illustration of this, and you can YouTube this, it is an older video that Stephen Covey did at one of his 7 Habits seminars. You can see all the 1980s hair if you YouTube this. But it's Stephen Covey inviting a lady up. And there are 2 vessels, 2 pitchers, if you will, and they're empty. And on the side of the table, he's got about 10 large rocks that are labeled with highly important activities. Getting back to your highest valued customer, going on vacation with your family, having some alone time for yourself, things like that. There has about 10 or so big rocks like that. And then he takes this vessel that has all these small little rocks and he fills the container with all these small rocks to about half full. And then he tells the lady that those small rocks represent all the things that seem to happen to us during our week. However, we have all these things that are important to us, but we can only get done what we can get done. And that's represented by the top of that vessel, that pitcher. And his challenge to her is to put all those important rocks into that vessel. Well, she moves some of the rocks around and she hammers some of the big rocks in. She's not able to get all of them. And then Covey says, you can work out of a different paradigm. And she notices that there's an empty vessel, an empty pitcher right beside that. And she goes, oh, well, if that's the case, I'm going to use that one. And she puts the big rocks in first, and every single one of them fit. And then she takes the small rocks and she pours them on top. And not all of them fit before the line of the top, meaning you're not getting everything done. But then the paradigm that he has is they're small rocks, so who cares if you're not getting the little things done? So the whole point of that is, are you planning your week based on the importance of what you need to do? Not just urgency, but importance. And are you planning the biggest things first, the big rocks first, and then all the small stuff that you don't have to plan? It's going to enter your week automatically. It's just going to come in. Those are going to fill in all the gaps. And if during your week you can't get to all of those small rocks, it doesn't matter because you did the most important things. I hope that played out well in your mind's eye as I was explaining it. We're going to have a link to that video on our show notes page. You can find it by going to YouTube and searching Big Rocks. I have no doubt about that. It is a great visual. It's one that I have each and every week where I plan. And yes, I do my bulk planning on the weekend for the next week. And then I always look at what I have to do that week. I never look at the day. Now, on the mobile components, that's a little difficult to do. You can still do it. You might have to open some things up to see what's going on during the day. But the reason I do that is if I'm just looking at each and every day, I'm not planning for the rest of the week. And I can't tell you how many times that if I knew that I was going to be doing something on Wednesday, I could have done it more efficiently and effectively on Monday or Tuesday, but I didn't plan that far out. And now I could have had even more time to do important things on Wednesday, but I was driving back out to the same area because I didn't look that far ahead with my schedule. So there it is. There's some additional content to all of the first week in January episodes that I have done previously. I hope you use that. And I also hope that you plan to grow this year. And I think a great way to plan to grow is a plan to go. And we have so many things that you can go to by going to scalinguph2o.com/events. And you can actually plan where are you going to be this year to meet new people, to learn new information, to challenge your way of thinking about things that you're thinking about right now. There's so many events related to our industry, and we try to put them all on our events page. Now, places that you will see me, and I'm telling you right now, I am still working on my calendar to see where I'm going to be. Several people have invited me to keynote and speak at conferences. So I'm trying to figure out if I can work those out around my schedule. Thank you so much for doing that. One of my favorite things to do. So if you invited me, I'm thanking you personally. Thank you for that. And I will get back to you shortly. But I do want to let you know that I will, without a doubt, be at the Association of Water Technologies function. So the first one I want to talk about is technical training. And we do that twice a year. So the first one's going to be February 25th through 28th in San Diego, California. And then the next one's going to be March 26th through 29th in Frisco, Texas. Now, we have so many programs that are going on during these technical trainings, and it has changed from years past. So I want to make sure that you know what to expect so you can get your ticket and you can be there so you and I can have a conversation. Well, of course, we're going to have at both of the trainings, RO training and sales training. And I get the privilege of doing the sales training. So if you haven't been to my sales training class, you will see I take a very different approach to sales, and I use what we've learned here on the podcast. So let me know what you think of that if you've been to my sales training class. So that runs concurrently with the reverse osmosis training. And RO and sales training is kind of a bonus add-on if you choose to do it. And the real start of that week starts the following day. And that's when we have concurrent courses going on. There's actually 4 concurrent courses going on. The first one is Fundamentals and Applications. This is like the basics of industrial water treatment. These are for people that train people, people that are newer in the industry, and people that have clients and want to make sure that they're explaining what they need to explain to that client, which is pretty much everybody. So don't think that Fundamentals and Applications isn't for you. All of these courses are for you. This just takes a more basic approach to it. Another course that's going on concurrently is kind of the intermediate course, if you will, and that's program design and operations. And then the more advanced course is named just that, advanced water training. So those courses are going on at the same time. And then depending on where you are, so if you are in San Diego, also concurrently is going to be the ASSE 12,080 training. So if you are somebody that does water management planning, this is the certification ASSE 12,080 that you can get behind your name. That's only going to be in San Diego. And then only in Frisco, that's going to be where the wastewater training is being held. So there you go. That's the entire training schedule. And I sure hope that I will see you there. Now, you might be getting ready to take your certified water technologist examination. Now, I've heard most people will take the advanced water training just to get a little bit more prepared to take that examination. So that's the feedback that I have received with that. So I want to pass that on to you. I will tell you that the CWT exam is about your entire career. So you will find help in everything that you take in one of those classes. But I think if you're getting ready to take it in the next couple of weeks, probably be well advised to take the advanced water training. Now, if you are going to take your certified water technologist examination, I have got something that can help you out. And by going to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep, you can get a free version of the CWT prep course that we created. And basically what that is me going through the first handbook on how to get your certified water technologist designation. There's some sample questions in there, and I give you a little preview of how I logic my way through some of those sample questions, and then also give you some places where you can bone up on information. Now, if you like that, we have a paid version of that course where there is a 100-question practice exam that we've created to try to get you to know where you are with all the various topics that you might see. And then you get to see me take that exam along with you, where I've done a video of me taking that exam on each question and how I logic my way through each and every question. I give you all sorts of standardized test-taking tips. And then I also give you some places you can go to bone up on some information that maybe you need some more knowledge in. So we kind of compress it to make it really easy to study for, but the goal is to give you confidence to go out and get your certified water technologist designation. I truly believe there are so many people listening to this podcast right now that could be certified water technologists. They just lack the confidence to schedule the exam. Well, that's why I did these prep courses. I want to make sure that you have that confidence so you can get that exam scheduled, because guess what? You're never going to get your CWT until you schedule the exam. And this is just a little bit of help to get you there. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/CWT. And the next event that I will be at with the AWT is the 2025 Annual Convention and Exposition. That's taking place November 12th through 15th at the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Folks, I have been to the Broadmoor several times before, and let me tell you, just that place is an experience of itself. I highly recommend that you go. What are you doing November 12th through 15th? The AWT convention is a great place to network with people, to learn new things. So much happens there, and November is so far away, but it won't be if you don't plan for it now. So go ahead and put November 12th through 15th in your calendar so you can block that time and then work towards getting there. We're going to have all the information on everything that I mentioned linked on our show notes page. So we'll make it very easy for you to find. Now, the last thing that I am going to mention is one of the goals that I told you that I accomplished last year. I received some feedback from that, and people were wondering how I read over 100 books a year. And I mentioned it last week. And I don't say that to brag. I say that to motivate. And I also say that to encourage, because the fact that I read a lot means that I'm learning new things. And one of my goals is to learn something new every day. And it is amazing how much you can learn if you decide that you are going to read. Now, how do you read when you're in a job like this? Well, I'm going to be the first to tell you that most of the books that I read are books that I listen to. And my brain does not care. I can remember books that I've read, and I can remember books just as well with ones that I've listened to. And of course, that is with a service called Audible. Now, I can get you a free book and a free month. If you want to try that out, you can go to scalinguph2o.com/audible. Maybe you have an Audible account and you've never used it, or you don't use it like you should. I think when you are driving out from account to go see customers, you should listen to this podcast. But in between listening to this podcast, it's a great way to get some of your reading done. And you might remember I had a previous guest challenging me on trying to get the replay speed up higher than just a 1.0. Because until then, I always listened to my Audible at a 1.0 speed. And this guest challenged me to take it up to 1.1 and get used to it. Take it up to 1.2, get used to it. Take it up to 1.3, get used to it. And now I'm reading 30% more as I'm driving from account to account. Now, depending on the author, I can go higher. I might have to go lower, but I can get through more content. And again, your brain really can't tell the difference in what you listen to what you've read. And when you train your brain that you can listen at a higher speed, your brain still remembers it. Now, I do something at the end of books. I call it a net out, and it's just a one-page document. And I'll write down some of the key things that I learned from that book and a brief summary. And if I ever need to, I know I read a book about that. What was that? I can search that because I have everything in my computer. And I can just simply search that and I can say, oh, yes, that's what it is. I also have a goal for all the books that I read, that I want to do one thing that I learned from that book. Now, maybe there's 100 things that were really good ideas in that book. Well, I can't do 100 things. I'm going to get lost in probably 5 things. So I just say, I want to do one of those things. And then I share with the mastermind group that this is the one thing I want you to hold me accountable for. In 3 weeks, I want you to ask me, did I do this? Am I keeping up with this? By the way, I do the same thing when I go to conferences. What's the one thing that I'm going to bring back that's going to change the day today? I love the one thing method because it's easier than 100 things. And it holds me accountable that I'm constantly learning something new, but I'm doing something with what I've learned. So I hope today's episode, with all the things that we have talked about, has inspired you to analyze last year. What is life trying to teach you, both with all of the goals that you've had, but also all of your relationships? And how do you really ensure that you are putting the effort that you need to in your most important relationships? How are you making sure that you are doing the big rocks first and you're not worrying about all the small stuff that fills in all the gaps? And that you have on your calendar that you are going to be at one of the AWT technical trainings, either February 25th through 28th or March 26th through 29th. And then you're going to be there to see me at the November 12th through 15th, 2025 AWT annual convention. And maybe you've got a few books to read on Audible. Nation, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. As I mentioned in the beginning, thank you for sharing this podcast. And I hope you save a little bit of money celebrating National Cut Your Energy Costs Day. And I hope 2025 is the best year yet. Talk to you next week, Scaling Up Nation. Struggling to prepare for the Certified Water Technologist exam? Our Certified Water Technologist prep course is here to help. Gain the confidence you need with comprehensive study materials and a 100-question practice exam. And the best part, we offer a free version to get you started. Head over to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep and take the first step towards your certification today.